don't sacrifice Kenya, because there is no other Kenya. Sisi tuko na Kenya moja. Na ningependa kusema hivi, wale ambao wanakaa kwa maofisi Nairobi, ofisi zao iko na AC na wako na maji ya chupa, na hawa wako na chai wanapewa na mandazi, wajue kwamba wako na amani kwa Nairobi, kwa sababu watu wa Isiolo, watu wa Wajir, watu wa Mandera, watu wa Turkana, watu wa Tana River, wao, they are shielding the enemy who would have come to take over our country.
Tuache siasa ya kugawanya nchi yetu kwa misingi ya kikabila. Kenya under our constitution 2010 is a unitary state, sharing power between the national government and the devolved units. Wewe ukianza kusema watu wangu, watu wangu, watu wangu, wewe ni adui wa Kenya.
Inaitwa shilingi moja ama nini? I don't even follow that discourse. Na kilometer. But what does it matter if you got all the money and it is misappropriated by those in positions of leadership?
So, Arnold, we're here, and already there are several cabinet secretaries that are on record opposed to what the Deputy President appears to be propagating. So that's Attorney General J.B. Muturi, the Professor Kithure Kindiki has spoken, Aden Duale has spoken, C.S. Murkomen has spoken, PCS Musalia Mudavadi has spoken, and many others. So what is the end game here?
I'll still take you back to where I started.
Yeah.
That the big issue here is elections. But then we are running away.
Elections within the party?
Yes, the grassroots elections we are
having. So does it
having.
mean all the CSs are pushing for certain officials versus what Gachagua is pushing?
Actually, was going to my third issue, and it will actually partly address that. Number one, as a country generally, not just UDA and Kenya Kwanza, we have got a generational handover that is actually happening right under our nose. That the millennials, these human beings born from 1981 to 1997, now form the bulk of the voters and are partly about a third of the leadership. So as we move to 2027, they become the real bulk of the leadership. So that generational handover is actually what is a little bit unstable within this, number one, within the coalition, number two, within these particular elections. And it's not just in UDA alone. You can actually see that there is the vibe and the feel that is cutting across all other political fields. So that challenge is what we do not know. Normally, we are not really prepared to handle change, especially one that we never rehearsed for. So there's the generational handover and the change that is actually happening. So then people would ask themselves, would, for example, Moses Wetangula, the speaker, at 77 in 2032, for example, be the leader of lawyers? Would Mudavadi, for example, at 73 in 2032, be the voice to actually speak? People start having those conversations. Would the Deputy President at 63 or 64 in 2032, for example, be the leader of the mountain? So what is happening here is a generational handover, and we are not prepared for it. And that's why, for what Steve said, is that we are having a vigorous conversation. There is a multidimensional dialogue, and no one ever said the dialogue is easy. Dialogue is difficult. That is why you actually see all these noises. So there's partly the generational handover.
So it's happening what is going on is a conversation that should be held in the next 8 years.
Literally, when it comes to leadership, I'll just remind you this, probably a little bit off the line, that in 1992, Hillary Ngweno, writing in the Weekly Review, spoke about young Kenyans doing marvelous things in the US, and he quoted a young man called Barack Obama, who had become, I think, the president of the Harvard Law Review in 1992. Let alone that young man would become the president of the US.
What is the connection here?
I'm giving you an example, a parallel. That you see, 8 years is not a long way. We are talking about 2027, which is definitely...
I'm sure you know that there are certain pressing challenges at the moment.
True, and that, fair enough, Sam. But you see, for politicians, the truth is that they're thinking about the next election. Every politician.
Do you have the wrong politicians?
Every politician.
I disagree very sharply with what Arnold is saying.
Yeah.
I think that kind of a conversation should not be extended to the wider public. We cannot actively accept a conversation that projects politics of the future to mask the problems for the present. What I have said, and I know is happening, is this. The issues Gachagua has raised could as well have been raised by Ndindi Nyoro if circumstances favored Ndindi Nyoro to raise them. For instance, if Gachagua, as the deputy president, was not feeling threatened in his own backyard, correct, he would have been the first person to champion adherence to Article 203 principles. Because I've said the principles are already outlined there. Mm-hmm. But you see, because politics is local, and that is a reality. Once he feels rattled in his backyard, he rallies around those people. And then he makes the kind of pronouncements that appear shocking. The reaction by Murkomen and the speaker, Wetangula, it's part of a political response to just cool off the temperatures, but they also know that the same thing could be said by the other leaders in Mount Kenya. They know this very well. In fact, this conversation is not new. Mm. What should worry Kenyans is this. Politicians will canvass support based on whatever thing that enters the imagination. Right now, we're talking about the finance bill, we'll be talking about division of revenue, and this conversation is a recurring theme. Each and every financial year, when we are developing the budget and the division of revenue, it's a recurring theme, but it has never divided the country. You know why? Because at the end of the day, we emphasize the parameters outlined in Article 203, which gives us the formula for division of revenue, the shareable revenue. We're not going to fail to pay attention to the issues raised by Mount Kenya. We will pay attention to them. And how will we pay attention to them if their leaders don't raise those issues? And we will not fail to pay attention.
The issues being raised by Mount Kenya?
Yes. The 1 man, 1 shilling, the 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, it doesn't scare me at all. It doesn't. It's all politics in that region, and it's okay to have that kind of politics. In Ukambani and in Northeastern, I can relate to a conversation that says, pay attention. As you pay attention to 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, please pay attention to 1 man, 1 kilometer, 1 shilling, 1 kilometer. Because of the expansive nature of the reason, listen, we are not densely populated. And this formula that I hear our brothers in Mount Kenya talking about will disadvantage us. Because when will we ever develop as Northeastern? I wonder, I'm not hearing from my backyard, Kisumu. I think we should need to add our voice to it. That robust conversation is necessary, but ultimately, when the decision is being made, we'll be testing it against the constitutionally ordained standards under Article 203. There's a particular formula there, I think about 9 or 11 indicators.
About 10, eh?
About 10 indicators. We need to tick each and every one. And at the end of it all, we must make sure that the way we apply national resources spurs development equally. And just right below Article 203, I think that must be Article 204, must be talking about the equalization fund. That even after division of the shareable revenue, whatever is still left for the national government, you may still reserve part of it to boost the regions that the equitable share of revenue will still not favor so much. Eh?
Right.
So I think we need to, and I like fora like this, because then we get to amplify things that politicians are not saying. If you get depressed, look at what is happening in the US. President Biden just released a propaganda video claiming that Donald Trump does not care about US servicemen. And it's a very, very dangerous video because it says these people have died and who died and what Trump said about those people. And he calls them failures. I mean, coming from the president's campaign team, that should be shocking because that's a new law in US politics. But even in our own local politics, Murkomen now characterizes what the DP is saying as a new law. They're a national leader, but they know, in fact, even him, he has tea and mandazi in his office, in the AC. He speaks as if those privileges are not extended to him, yeah? So I think the debate is okay to have, but at the end of the day, the reason why we have the finance bill, we have the budget almost being read and all this is so that we can spur robust public discourse on these issues and so that we can guide the public on how to understand or unpack the politics.
All right. I wanted to hear your response because Arnold raises a few questions that all that we are seeing here is about elections. I thought it was actually the UDA grassroots elections. Apparently, it's 8 years from now.
Yeah, and sadly, it characterizes everything that the UDA believes in, that right now, when the country is faced with so much difficulty, ever, I do not even think that there's a time since independence that Kenyans have felt this low. Kenyans are the highest taxed since independence, and literally all government services are at their lowest, ever since. So seeing a ruling coalition...
What do you mean government services are the lowest?
I want to confirm to you here today, Sam, that free primary education program that is 2 decades old, there is no single coin that has been sent by this Kenya Kwanza government for this particular term. I'm talking about a 2 decades old program. So when we say that this is at the lowest, look at what was happening in the health sector the other day. For close to 50 days, the health sector was paralyzed, and we only saw a coalition that was wearing yellow all over the place, telling us how we should vote for them, and so on and so forth. So really, this is characteristic of the ruling party. They do not care about the issues that sit very deeply in Kenyans' hearts. And when I see the conversation about 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote coming from the deputy president, I do not trust it, and I do not trust him. This is the same person 1.5 years shy during the campaigns. This is the same person that traversed the whole county beating that kind of a proposal. So where did he find the sole moment? When did it occur to him that I think this is important? Does he care to have that conversation with us? I am a Nairobian that comes from Kasarani. In Kasarani, really, we needed it. If that conversation had been let to mature, today, the people of Kasarani could be very happy people, because that Kasarani could probably be split, and the benefits could be right. So the man that denied us that benefit, seeing him now claiming that he's being fought because of his position about, that's a big lie that nobody is going to buy. I think what is happening to the deputy president is that he has seen the dissatisfaction around the mountain region. All the services, there is no day since I was a grown-up that businesses have come down like now. We are talking about 2023 taxation issues that brought down so many businesses. Right now, instead of us having a conversation about 2024, they have found something to distract us from talking about those taxation issues, and they want us to concentrate on their angles, and we tell them, no, we refuse. Before Mr. Gachagua parades himself as a crusader of 1 shilling, 1 man, 1 vote, can he tell us why he denied us that in the past? We are not entertaining lies anymore. At what point did you think that is important? And do you care to tell us, at the point where all the necessary conditions were present for Mount Kenya to get that particular one, you traversed the mountain, divided Kenyans. What unity are you talking to us about? When did those people disunite? What was your contribution in that disunity? Can you take responsibility for starters before jumping into another bandwagon I have seen? Now you have left the hustlers bandwagon. Now you are in a villagers. I've seen villagers bandwagon. Really, I think Kenyans, once beaten, twice very shy. I want to encourage Kenyans to really be very honest with the political class, that we are not expecting them to be rotating from one car point to the other, telling us about uniting us. Nobody needs to be united with any other. What we want to hear, we want businesses to run, we want the health sector to run, we want the education sector to run. That's what we want. But we cannot have such an ineffective government that does not care about the people, a government that wants to tell us about austerity measures, but we are seeing what is happening. In fact, I'm listening to this conversation about choppers, and I'm wondering, the president the other day told us that the Friends supported him to go to the United States. And I'm wondering, this country, if something had happened to the president that time, had we even, the narrative of Friends could not have come in right now. We could be looking at a country, in chaos right now, people saying that the president has been shot somewhere. At what point are these people responsible? Do they know the weight of some of the things that they speak to people about? When we are seeing the deputy president telling us he was hanging in the air somewhere, had something happened to him, does he know the consequences that they would have put this country into? Really encouraging the big two of this country to try and settle a little bit and understand the magnitude of the words that come from their mouths. It is not always about the vote.
What if he's just genuinely explaining why he was late?
Whether he is explaining or he is not, what we are saying is that we have seen how they behave. They are taking matters so casually, so casually. Can you believe that Kenyans were wondering that we spent 200 million transporting the president to the US? At that particular time, it was an official trip. only for him to come and tell us, no, my friends did. At what point did it change very quickly from being an official state visit to something that I and my friends can negotiate and make true? I think we are so casual about some things, and we are losing accountability to the people very fast. And the other thing that we lost long time ago is integrity. That you say this today and tomorrow you say the other, and you do not care to tell people that this is what I said yesterday, because at that particular time, the set of facts that had been shared with me supported that position.
Okay, all right. Let's listen to, because you say, I think it's Steve who says that the Mount Kenya region is raising a particular issue about the resources sharing. Let's listen to two leaders who spoke about this in that region yesterday.
Laikipia North registered voters na ni kwetu wakuwe ni 40,000. Member of parliament wa huko apewe 100 million vile ambavyo inapeanwa sasa. Wachira Karani apewe mara 3 ya hiyo. Mbule wa Laikipia apewe mara 4. Mbunge wa Ruiru naye apewe mara 8 ya hiyo, kwa sababu naye ana watu wengi ambao anawakilisha.
Formula ya kugawa pesa, Senator. Unajua hiyo formula sio hawa wananchi wa Laikipia wanatengeneza. Hiyo formula inatengenezwa na Senate mahali wewe unakaa. Sijaona siku hata moja umepeleka mswada ya kugawa pesa vile unaambia wananchi hapa. Enda bunge uwaambie kwa bunge.
So I think the year was 2020 when the Senate passed the current formula that is being used to allocate resources to the counties, and there are different parameters that are there. Obviously, there's an amount that is shared equally across the different counties, but there's also an amount that is shared based on the unique features of every county. I'm trying to get that. And at the moment, what the Senate approved is that population will determine allocation of resources up to 18%, health sector, which is the health services, 17%, agriculture 10%, urban services 5%, roads 8%, poverty index 14%, land area 8%, basic share 20%. Basic share would imagine that everyone gets on equal basis, but when it comes to land area, poverty index and population, then this takes into account the unique factors. Probably taking care of 1 kilometer, but also 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling in there, but different proportions. Titus, so where do we go from here? Because clearly you can hear Kimani Ichung'wah referring leaders to Commission on Revenue Allocation, the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council that is chaired by the Deputy President, and then the Senate, which is really the path to follow to determine the sharing formula. Yet we have a regime already going on, and it serves a particular period of time before it's reviewed. So what should Kenyans do with what is going on?
Okay, Sam, the Constitution has given a lead as to how the national revenue is supposed to be shared. And that is why it establishes the Commission on Revenue Allocation. It also gives the Senate the mandate to come up with, to pass legislation on how national revenue is going to be shared, especially between the national government and the county government. Now, one of the biggest challenges that was manifested in 2019, and what is now coming out from the constitutional path, is that the Constitution has not specifically spelled out what is the exact formula to be followed. That's why you see there are recommendations that come in after every 5 years. And I think that was very deliberate, because the variables keep on changing. The population keeps on changing, and poverty levels also keep on changing, and so on and so forth. So that is one of the biggest challenges that we face today. But of course, the mandate to review how national revenue is going to be shared is a mandate of the Senate. So in as much as people may have desires that population, which is 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, should be a factor, especially for regions that are perceived to harbor dense population, we already have a constitutional lead pathway as to what needs to be followed. However, that lead pathway is not exhaustive because it still comes back to the Senate for the Senate to consider the parameters that have been set under Article 203 as stated by Steve.
Right.
But even that, then we come to a situation whereby even after the Senate has come up with a way as to how to share the national revenue and to give considerations to the recommendations that are being given by the Commission on Revenue Allocation, that has to go to Parliament for approval. And you remember in 2019, there was a deadlock as to how to proceed based on the formulas. And the formulas that were being applied came in handy and it manifested these differences. So that is the biggest challenge that we have right now. The Constitution has not specifically provided for as to how to share this national revenue.
And I remember that time, there were actually concerns because based on I think the amount was about 370 billion shillings that was available that year.
Yes, the president raised, the then president
different
raised
countries were saying that they risked losing some of the resources, which actually was now going to the one vote mantra, if I may call it so. But then the resources, as you're saying, were topped up just to make sure that no county received less resources than the previous year.
Yes.
So are we being genuine in this conversation?
Obviously, and as I've said it before, the proponents of the one man, one vote, one shilling are not being genuine. Because you remember in the BBI, the people who are now progressing this narrative, they opposed that proposal. You remember in the BBI, there was a proposal, especially, and that proposal was brought by the then president, and he was telling people from the mountain that this is what I propose. The current deputy president opposed it.
Completely.
So for now, I am a bit surprised that he has turned around and now sees a lot of sense in that proposal. And that is what now I make of this. Out of all these things, I make it this way, that it appears he has been rattled and is uncomfortable within the space of the government, and the only solace he can find is to retreat back to his backyard and find something that he could use to find unity behind him and move with it, so that now he can assert himself in a way that he deems fit. So for me, I don't think it is genuine at this point.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear more from an MP, a governor, and sorry, not a senator, but a CS who is a former senator.
Yeah.
Deputy President wetu ambaye anatoka hili eneo letu la Mount Kenya ndiye chairman wa IBEC, the Intergovernmental Budgetary and Economic Council. Peleka kwa IBEC chini ya Deputy President, mutengeneze sheria, ikuwe sheria, tugawe pesa vile tunataka zigawiwe.
Wakati tunapozungumza juu ya unity of the mountain, kuna watu ambao wamekimbia kwa rais kumwambia Gachagua anataka kutoa Wakikuyu kwake apeleke sijui wapi. Maune maheni. We do not want unity of the mountain to take the community away from the president.
Wewe governor umeniangusha. Wewe ndio mzee wetu wa sehemu hii. Wewe ndio nguzo na macho ya kuhakikisha kwamba wanasiasa ndogo ndogo wakiongea mambo yenye mepita kiasi, wewe ndio unapuliza, unamwambia mimi ni mzee, wacha nipunguze. Lakini kwa Kenya mzima na kwa hii milima, wewe ndio unaweka petroli na kuongeza mafuta iende isonge mbele.
All right, petroli. They're very expensive. It's very expensive now, isn't it? Arnold.
Yeah.
So then, what next?
I actually just
because we can't wait for 8 years for this noise to be resolved.
I wanted to lend my voice to the one man, one vote, one shilling debate. That I've not really spoken about, but I will really push it to context, because if we lose context, you know, this conversation, like everybody has said here, is not new. And since it's not been new, why is it coming now? If you get the context, then you do not lose the debate.
What is the
Otherwise,
context?
if we then run away with this debate as is, then we might actually lose exactly what's happening. Number one, when we talk about revenue, we are not talking about the same thing. Members of Parliament are talking about CDF. As in, that is just where you begin. So when everybody's talking about this one man, one shilling, and they don't mean the same thing. Governors would be talking about what they receive for devolution. What then is in question is that then the rest of us would ask questions like what Murkomen was actually trying to actually put in Nyeri. That, for example, there's about 40 billion shillings in infrastructure that would be going to Nyeri alone. If you actually are able to watch that video completely, he actually broke down what was coming in via Kera and what was going via. Then the other people in Western, for example, would ask, if 40 billion shillings in infrastructure alone is going to Nyeri, then what happens, for example, to Kakamega, where I come from? Then there will be questions about that. So
how much is going to Kakamega? Nyeri in comparison to Kakamega, how much?
I was raising that because I remember an MP, the MP for Sabot, did a comparison. I don't know where he pulled that data, and he was talking about
Pukose?
Amisi Caleb pulled up and said that from the documents he's actually gathered, I think in the next financial year, on road maintenance alone, Kikuyu constituency, not county, Kikuyu constituency was getting, I'm actually quoting a source, it might not be accurate, 1.5 billion shillings in road maintenance, and the entire of Western, for example, was getting 50 million shillings. So if we do not approach this thing, and I want us to pivot back to what I said, that the context or the background against which this conversation is being had, number one, is the grassroots elections. The last time a political party held grassroots elections in this country was 13 years ago. And as much as and there's a reason why political parties in this country ran away and shy away from grassroots elections. The last time a political party did that, there were men in black. It wasn't easy. After that, they then moved on to a new way of doing things. That
I wanted to hear this, that Nyeri, for example.
Can I just finish?
Okay.
I quoted what the CS said, for example. So somebody else then would ask, are you having a project of that similar nature in Western, for example, in this financial year? If it's not there, it might come in the years to come. But if it's not there, then a simple mind will then say that this year, since you are finalizing the Kenol Nyeri Road, and this is how much is going on, then that is assumed to be going to Nyeri, for example, which is not true.
I'm then looking for the context, Arnold.
So the context is, I actually want to put it against two things that we don't want to talk about. Number one is the grassroots elections. And for you to mobilize the ground, Ogolle already said, people employ propaganda, people employ PR, people employ...
You want to tell me Governor Kahiga and CS Murkomen are talking about grassroots elections?
I'll tell you the basis of this particular conversation. If we did not have grassroots election going on and people feeling threatened with their bases being threatened, we will not be resurrecting these conversations. It's an uncomfortable truth, but this is it. And then for Governor Kahiga, I think, for Governor Kahiga, I think I want to be very pragmatic in addressing him. I think it's Ronald Reagan trying to paraphrase Cicero, who said that that if it were not for old men advising young men, there would not be states. In this particular instance, we actually are seeing young men advising an old man who actually is very polarizing, which is not a fair thing.
Who's advising who?
Murkomen is advising Governor Kahiga. That's what
Arnold, yes. Is that how your politicians advise each other?
Yeah, that is an advice. It's an advisory. He actually, if you watch, I have had the opportunity.
Regret. That is not advice.
No, I have watched the entire video, Sam, and he's actually saying that you should be. That is an advisory. So the word "should" is actually an advisory. So Sam, can I finish this by saying this? That we have
Arnold.
I will lose my train of thought, Sam. Just allow me to kill this.
Just note it down. You have very many sticker notes right there. I'm asking you this. So you're telling me that the MPs are talking about CDF.
The governors are talking about the devolution money.
Devolution resources.
And then the rest of us will talk about
CDF. So what is your understanding of how resources for CDF are shared?
It's not about my understanding. There's already a 10-parameter framework provided for by the Constitution. Once in a while, we try and adjust. But then the biggest
issue with how CDF resources are shared?
It's different.
That is where we had, was the genesis. For example, I was born in Mathare. In Mathare alone, we have got 500,000 people on a less than a 5-kilometer square land. So definitely, if we go the one man, one vote, 1 shilling approach, I can tell you, Mathare would be one of those places that actually benefits more. But this is the point. When we had this 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling debate, it started, initially, the person who pushed it very much, incidentally, was Moses Kuria, when I was the Secretary General of his party then.
You know, you're not
and it was about the CDF.
I want to move to the other panel.
And that is why I'm
an issue with the sharing of CDF resources, yes or no?
I do not think there is.
Okay. Is there an issue?
Let me just settle one thing. If there was a real dispute, it would find itself in court. Now, maybe the public needs to know this. There are 4 critical pillars that undergird our democracy. One is the constitutional or the legal framework itself, which I've said it's our true north. And all is said and done, we'll have to make reference to the provisions under the Constitution, and those provisions are settled and very stable. Number 2, the judiciary. The judiciary is an important player in moderating politics. Mm-hmm. If politics drives us outside the framework ordained or preordained by the Constitution, the judiciary is there to reinterpret the law in a manner that restores that stability. Number 3, it's what we're having now, public engagement. Mm-hmm. Public vigilance is a critical component. So then we're able to unpack whichever way we know. I think Arnold is doing a great job in giving us insights about UDA politics. But also the other side, politics of rhetoric, also explains a lot. And I've already told you, whatever Gachagua has said, for me, is not shocking. It could have been said by Ndindi Nyoro. Maybe why Gachagua is saying it and not Ndindi Nyoro is what Arnold is trying to explain. The 4th aspect is actually public interest litigation. It's a very important pillar. I am watching the outcome of this debate. If it's framed outside Article 81 on the principles that undergird our democracy, and Article 203 on the principles that undergird shareable revenue, we will definitely be moving to court, and the government expects that. The Attorney General knows that. So if there is no dispute that has made its way, you saw now the division of revenue has been under Article 213 has been referred to a joint committee, mediation committee. Yeah. It always goes to a joint mediation committee every financial year, because we can't always agree on the actual figure that should be sent to the counties. Because what is proposed by Commission of Revenue Allocation is always adjusted by Treasury, and then National Assembly adjusts even lower, further, or sometimes keeps it at the levels proposed by the Treasury, and this always offends the Senate. And that's where the dispute lies. I have litigated those cases before. And I can tell you, if there is a dispute that can be resolved within the parameters of the framework in the Constitution, it will then find its way in court. So what the public needs to know and to understand is this. I would not be worried about politics of propaganda. And you see, politics, power, just like they say, power abhors vacuum. And because the Right Honorable Raila Odinga is involved in politics of AU, had he taken a position that offends the entire Kenya Kwanza team, this disunity, some of which is being highlighted by Arnold, maybe would have been suppressed or would not have emerged at all. Right. So it's the kind of robust conversation that the political space naturally evolves to accommodate. All right. But the finality of the outcome will always be tested against the adherence of the principles that are already preordained.
I think you're talking about Article 217 about the...
217.
Let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV. Kenya Sam Gituko, they are stuck to use the Citizen Daybreak. This morning, what are Kenyans saying about this? We have Chris Kilonzo, who is from the Political Parties Liaison Committee, saying the problem of using choppers was because of carrying those blogging MPs as they took photos and videos on a military chopper. Okay. Sam Masika, why would Rigathi arrive later than the president? Who cleared the president's travel and left the DP out? Protocol demands that the DP arrives first, then the big man. There is more than meets the eye. Is it sabotage? So you're saying Kenya Kwanza excels in doublespeak. We might call it lying. They will say anything to win votes, not to improve the lives of Kenyans. They promised heaven during campaigns, but are now doing the opposite without proper explanation. Let's be wise and vote with our brains. Godi Baraza, you're saying as a country we collect enough revenue that will equitably be shared across all 47 devolved units. However, the budgetary corruption conveniently leaves us at a deficit that will deliberately not be filled. And Honorable Leon Sioi, if I would be asked to propose a formula of sharing the national cake, I would strongly recommend that the CRA and IBEC should be given an opportunity to analyze and allocate the resources without conventional political interference. And Babu Michael, you're saying the strong political stance being taken by the two different sects in the sects now in the UDA party. Most so, Central Kenya leaders are misplaced. We have Finance Bill 2024, which should form most of our debates, not the unfortunate political statements we hear. And indeed, that's